All right, we're live in West London. David, hello, how are you?
I'm pleased to be here. Thank you for
Well,
inviting me.
thank you very much for coming. And you're also known as the Hemp Hero.
That was a brand name that I came up with for the organic soap that we're producing, and it was simply because it was the first thing that came to my mind. But using that moniker really also to get involved with the hemp industry, get involved with the hemp community. So it helps to have a bit of a badge.
I
Shall we
like
say.
it. I like it. I think I first ran into you at Hempfest
Yes.
in Glastonbury, probably around a month or so now ago, and you were doing a talk on Korean farming techniques.
Yes, Korean natural farming.
Korean natural farming.
Yeah. Basically, it's something that I've learned over the years. I've been practicing for a number of years, and when I started to look at the idea of going larger scale, that's where the Hemp Hero came in. We needed to fund going a larger scale, so that's where we produce in the organic hemp soap.
So you grow hemp. You have a hemp farm.
We're actually at the moment just a agroforestry project. So, but we are working with Vitality Hemp with Nathaniel over there, and he's going to help us to get our license, hopefully within the in time for the next season. But primarily, I came to Korean natural farming for the agroforestry. But also from a personal perspective as well. I like to have organic plants, and I like to be able to not buy any bottled nutrients. Basically, that was where I came to it. The idea of putting on the lab coat, getting out the measurements and everything, it always proved to be too much, too little, wrong time. Trying to work to a schedule from a manufacturer, and you completely forget to look at the plant. So the introduction to Korean natural farming was really a way of learning more about how the plant is growing rather than what we're trying to feed the plant. So that's where I moved into Korean natural farming, simply to get away from going and buying bottled nutrients.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about agroforestry then. Is this purely just the looking after trees, making sure they've got optimal health?
Pretty much. Well, agroforestry is more of a planned agricultural system based around a what we'd call a perennial orchard. So within modern agriculture, you're seeing a bit of an adoption in as much as they would have in between row crops. They may have trees or bushes or shrubs. They may have an apple orchard, shall we say, or any form of orchard, which they would also grow companion plants. Most commercial operations tend to be the single crop. So it's a field of wheat or it's an orchard of apples. Anything around it or anything in between it is pretty much not needed or not considered to be anything other than a hindrance. So agroforestry is designing a system which over time will actually manage itself. And the idea is that once established, that forest will effectively feed itself, that forest will support itself, that forest will be able to operate at the optimal level. And for Korean natural farming, that's what you're trying to do with the soil, is get the soil to a position where the biology can handle and accommodate heavy feeders, if you like, and perennial crops are part of that. So it's as much myself trying to be lazy. I wanted to do something that, rather than me going out and buying a combine harvester, I wanted to be able to come back in 10 years' time and have a income, have a crop that is pretty much far easier to manage, and something that I won't have to keep coming back to year after year after year. It's something really for a lazy man's way of farming, if you like.
Well, was it Bill Gates that said he'd always hire a lazy developer over, someone that wasn't, because they'd find the quickest, most efficient way of doing something?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, it's I looked at the system, and the problem I found with it, and this is no criticism of anybody who's pioneered this area, is that there was one essential element missing, which is the part below the plants, the soil. Everything was about creating the right plants to support the trees, and for the right trees to support the right plants, for the system to be designed in a way that you'd have windbreaks in there, you would have glades in there, you'd have a companion of plants and trees, but you kind of discounted the soil. It will happen. It will happen when the trees make it happen, when the shrubs make it happen, when the climbers make it happen. So everything in permaculture, from my perspective, was very much from the ground up. The layers, the 7 layers, and disregarding the soil below. So I came to Korean natural farming and agroforestry with the idea of putting them together. If I want to create a forest in a field, then I'm going to have to get the right soil biology, because at the moment the only thing that's in there is pretty much grass. That's something that I can handle. It's great. It's a free source of fertilizer for me, but to really accelerate the process for a forest, I need to look. And I looked and said to myself, who feeds a forest? That led me down the line of Jeff Lowenthal's to people such as Sepp Holzer, and those were my inspiration to move into agroforestry. And because I'm in Totnes in South Devon, we're close to the Agroforestry Research Trust. So I trained under Martin Crawford, simply attending the courses that he applies there, and we took that model and we're applying that to well, at the moment it's a 4-acre plot that we've got that's going to extend out to another to 11 eventually. So that's how I got to Korean natural farming, and that's how I see it links into agroforestry.
Right, nice. Yeah, so you've got on one level, and is this so? Most people at the moment in agroforestry, are they focused around, like you mentioned, these symbiotic relationships from plant to plant?
Yeah.
Whereas you're going, almost taking a step back from that and allowing an ecosystem on your farm or your forest where actually those symbiotic relationships will be automatically created based on the needs of that particular place.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you're going to build a city, you need buildings, because eventually that city will have a population. But you also need the ancillary services underneath. You need to have water, you need to have roads, you need to have electricity, you need to have all of the elements so that those buildings can be built. Because you can't just turn up and start mixing concrete. You need power to mix that. So what we're doing is looking at the forest and saying, who feeds the forest? We understand it's the microbes. Right. If it's the microbes, what are the best microbes? And those are the indigenous microbes. So we go to areas which have not been developed. They have to be fairly local as well. Indigenous obviously means local, but at the same time we're a very small island with we don't have too much of an extreme of climate, shall we say. But we would go to areas which have been undisturbed. That means that soil biology has been able to adapt itself to be the best that it needs to be. You're taking that biology and then you're feeding that the best resource that you can, the cheapest resource that you can. For us, that is actually boiled potato. That's the cheapest way which we can feed microbes. And then we put that soil life onto the grassland, shall we say, or we put it to where we're planting our trees. The reason being is because those microbes already work in symbiosis with a tree. Any plant is basically exuding sugars. The photosynthesis process is basically the generation of sugars, which in exchange with all the other soil life, it means that a tree, if it requires something, it can exude something which something else will go, I know how to get that. So how do you put that intelligence into the soil? The soil knows how to grow grass. That's great. But what if we take, rather like humans, if we take a person from Britain and we send them over to the Far East or the Far West, wherever, to a completely different environment, they're going to teach people. You probably know how to make a curry. I'm sure your great-grandparents didn't know how to make a curry unless they were over in India. But the point is that there are new skills that are being brought along. And these are super soldiers. These are people who are like, yeah, we know how to take moisture out of the air, no problem. They know how to handle heat. They know how to handle cold. They know how to handle the environment that is around them. So we take them, we feed them, we multiply them, and then when we put them onto the soil, we then feed them. And again, we're feeding them in almost homeopathic levels of nutrients, if you like. Because the idea is the indigenous microorganisms essentially are highly concentrated fungal spores. And if you've ever read anything by Paul Stamets, we're now finally waking up to the idea of mycelium and what it does. I read a book a number of years ago, What a Plant Knows, and it was very interesting because it pretty much put it into the perspective. If you were somebody who was housebound, but they needed to be able to go out and get food, you would have to have something to exchange with somebody else to go and get that. It's the same with plants. Trees, plants, they all need certain things. They can't move, they can't go and get them. But if they have a symbiotic relationship, that's fine. I know where to get boron. Bosh, I'm off. I can go and get it. We're also repairing the soil as well. So a lot of the times the microbes will come into the environment. Hang on, there's a new fresh faces here, and lo and behold, you've got the party going on, and they teach them how to do things. So you're essentially I try to humanise it, if you like. Think of it as people. You go, you learn new skills. We actually take in the IMO process where we take the IMO from IMO 1 to IMO 5. You're essentially training your soil. So at the third stage, you're training your soil to work with those microbes. That then means that your soil can operate as a forest soil would do. And anything pathogens, any deficiencies, they're all because of lack of diversity. Same with our own human health. If you have a proliferation of E. coli in your gut, you're going to get diarrhea. So how do we resolve that? We put in lactic acid bacteria. They knock heads together, they stop the bad boys taking over, and they bring balance. So that's what we're doing with the IMO, is bringing that idea of balance and diversity, using those microbes that know how to generate that balance and diversity. Plus also, microbes are nutrient. The excrement of microorganisms is nutrient. So it's rather like you and I, we are 80% water. Well, so it's a microbe. So there's always you've got heavy microbial life in your soil, you're going to have moisture. So we don't have any drought issues. This last summer, prime example. You only need to drive around, and I drove from Devon to London, and I could see the destruction of the soil because the soil just didn't know how to handle not having moisture because there was a low microbial life in there. So what we try to do is bring the microbes that, if they know how to handle drought, they come out. If it's too wet, they go in.
So how does that work? So let's say there were two patches of land side by side on your drive from Devon to London.
Yeah.
One of them had been treated with these microbes.
Yep.
And it had a healthy level of these microbes in the system, healthy immune system, if you will.
Yep.
And the other
Yep.
one hadn't been treated.
Yep.
What's the difference you're going to see after a drought?
Well, and from my personal experience, we did not suffer from a drought this summer. We didn't have any issues with moisture at all. We do a lot of growing in hugel cultures, which are essentially a recreation of the forest floor. We have no drought issues. We had no drought issues whatsoever because there is enough life in the soil, and with life there's moisture, because all life is 80% moisture, pretty much. So where you have that that environment, you don't have those issues. It's the same as a human stomach. If you eat something that's got a little bit too much of salmonella, you're going to have an issue. But your stomach does have salmonella in there, or your system does have salmonella in there, in the tiniest amounts. But it's that balance and that diversity which is important. So the balance and diversity to a good gut health is the same as soil health. You need that.
Right, and so you mentioned fungi, and you mentioned Paul Stamets, one of my heroes. What part are fungi playing in this? I understand there's kind of mycelial networks in the soil. Is this part of the techniques?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, IMO in its simplest sense really is going to be highly fungal spores. The idea is that what we're doing is we're capturing them, and in that process, rather like you shaking a flower and it releasing the seed, they will go into a form which they will sporulise basically, so that when you then reintroduce moisture, so we're taking the IMO, we're doing that by using a starch form. We then take that IMO and we mix it with brown sugar. That brown sugar stabilises the IMO. Think of it like...
Sorry, what's IMO?
IMO is the indigenous microorganisms.
Right.
So we want to go to a forest and we need to identify areas which are going to be highly fungal. How do we do that? Well, you can just scrape away leaf mould and you should see material. And you'll see on that material white hyphae. Well, if you're seeing hyphae, then you're seeing a colonisation of mycelium that's highly concentrated. So what we're doing is we're going to take that and we're going to feed it the best food that it can have. It's like putting out a banquet. So we gather the IMO by putting out a banquet. They proliferate within the medium, which is hard-boiled rice. We then take that rice, mix it with equal parts of brown sugar, and then we've stabilised it. What that then means is we've effectively put all that life, which has sporalised, so it's ready to fire out as soon as it's woken up again. And I've got to say, big thanks to the explanation of this. This is Drake, a guy who I know online, and the way he described it was very apt. It's like putting Han Solo in carbonite. So you're taking that life and you're suspending it in suspended animation in essentially brown sugar, because it binds with the water molecules and it effectively puts them asleep. You're then using that as a form of inoculation. Now that inoculation, so you can take merely a teaspoon of that and you can add that to water and you could proliferate that out onto your land, but we would rather take that and then multiply it. And to multiply it, you would add it to something like wheat bran. That's the conversion over from Korea. Over in Korea, they would use rice hulls. Over here, we don't grow a lot of rice, but we grow a lot of wheat, so we would use wheat bran. We can also, and this is where I'm working with the hemp industry, there's a lot of, inverted commas, waste from the hemp. The shells dehulled seeds, that's a perfect medium for growing this IMO. So we take a teaspoon of this IMO, which is suspended in sugar, we add it to another medium, which is typically wheat bran. That life again proliferates out, multiplies out extensively. We then dry that out. We're effectively again putting it into a stasis mode. That is your IMO3. So IMO to the power of 3, if you like. We then can, again, we can use the IMO at that stage as a soil amendment. We can just spread it out. And if you've ever come across bokashi, which is Japanese specialised compost, it's pretty much the same thing. That is used as a soil amendment. We can then take the IMO3 and we can again take it to the next stage, which is the best stage to get it to in some respects, is to IMO4. And again, we're introducing that to our soil. We're teaching the microbes how to work with the microbes in our soil. Again, increasing the power of the microbes. By that I mean every time we take a spoonful, that spoonful turns into a barrel load. Every time we take a barrel load, that barrel load turns into a skip load. So it's exponentially increasing the amount of life that we can then put out onto our soil. And that process just requires a number of inputs, as we're known. And that's what the other part of Korean natural farming. Not only is the gathering of the IMO, the proliferation of the IMO, the growth of the IMO, but also feeding that IMO. And that's where we have a number of different recipes, which again, the idea behind that is you're creating micronized food for which you're going to feed the microbes. A lot of it is based on sugar, and there is a lot of sugar involved in that. And this is where there's other ways in which we can do Korean natural farming, not strictly Korean natural farming, but we can do natural farming by using a cheaper method than brown sugar. But so Korean natural farming is essentially making soil amendment, a highly specialised compost which is full of the super soldiers, the best of the best of the best of the best of the best. They know how to handle things. We feed them very simple sugars, same as a plant would do. That would then multiply them out, and at the same time those inputs and those recipes are there not only to offer food, but we're also offering medicine, we're also offering a number of different elements. If you go to a nutrient shop, you'll see a grow and a bloom. Well, there's elements, there's recipes within Korean natural farming that will give you those elements. So if you're looking to bloom, it'll be water soluble calcium. So that's where we're creating a soil system by taking the indigenous microorganisms. We're then feeding that sort of soil system and trying to do it at a very cheap level as well.
Right. Okay. Wow. That's amazing stuff. So
there's a lot in there.
What struck me as interesting is when you mentioned that you suspend it in the brown sugar, and you then put it in the wheat, was it?
Wheat bran, yeah.
Wheat bran, yeah.
Yeah.
That strikes me as quite mushroom cultivators growing mushrooms at home. They get a substrate and they inoculate it, or that's the spores going in, I guess. But basically, that mycelial network grows around the grain, and you can kind of see it growing there. So is this the same?
Exactly the same. Exactly the same, except what they do is they have one particular species, be it oyster, be it shiitake, whatever it may be. What we're doing with IMO is the same thing. You said the spores. We're gathering those spores, but we're gathering spores which are so broad. We're gathering other elements, protozoa, nematodes, everything which is diverse in the soil. We're capturing, we're sporalizing, and then, like the mushrooms, we're proliferating that out. We're giving them a food source, they consume that, and then the fruit is the mushroom. For us, it's exactly the same. You've got it.
And so are we just kind of taking all of these different microbes and biodiversity from the forest? Are we saying that's all goodness, or could you unwittingly perhaps introduce? So again, sorry, on the mushroom theme here, I have really been into my Paul Stamets recently, but you look at honey fungus, right? It's a parasitical fungus, and that will grow and it will take over trees. It will kill these plants because it's parasitical. Yeah. Is there any sort of potluck in where you're selecting your microbes and you're taking the hyphae or the sample from the forest, you're taking that away? Is there cases where it could introduce unwanted microbes into this setup?
It's a good question, and the answer is, from my understanding, we don't know. We don't know because we haven't identified the biology that's even sitting on the planet's surface, let alone below it. So if you was to ask me as a scientist, I'd say no. But in truth, the good and the bad are one. Again, a principle of the natural farming. Medicine, if overused, can be poison. So there is no such thing as good and bad, if you like. Each has its own function. So nematodes, they perform a function. Yet some agriculture will look at it and go, right, we don't want any nematodes. It's like looking out into the streets of London and saying, right, I'm going to choose one particular nationality and say you're bad because. No, there's no such thing. They work in symbiosis. If we do have that, and again, this is where people, certainly if they're looking, let's be honest, bring the outdoors indoors, and they're looking to utilise this technology. If they're looking to use that, the thing with growing indoors is always, it's got to be clean, it's got to be clinical, it's got to be, well, send a kid out, ask them to come back clean. They won't, because the world is dirty. It's the same as the forest. There is no good or bad. They are as one. Each has their own function. And if you're worried about bringing that into your system, then I would say don't worry too much, because you only need to look at how living soil has come in leaps and bounds. People understand, I've got to have a cover crop around my plant. I've got to have a bit of straw laying around so the soil doesn't dry out. So the commercial side of indoor growing, shall we say, is not so concerned with bringing in bad bugs, if you like. But I look at it as if we do have an issue, we've got a resolution. So lactic acid bacteria is an emergency worker. If we have a really bad blight, or if we have some form of disease or parasite, as you say, come through, there's a way in which we can arrest that, and that was where we would use lactic acid bacteria. That will come in, will knock heads, will rebuild, will get everything back to balance. And with balance, there is no issues. So the idea of I'm bringing in foreign soil and I'm bringing in contaminants, that's not the case. It's not the case. What we're looking to do is bring in that life, and that life is going to go into the soil. Now that may have, or that will have, an effect on the biology, but thus far I've seen nothing but positive. And let's be honest, a few little flying things around aren't going to do any harm to a plant. The important thing is having that balance and diversity in the soil. With that, a strong plant can handle anything. Somebody with a good constitution, oh yeah, I ate that curry, no, oh yeah, no problem. Somebody else would be rolling around on the floor, or any other food, kebab, whatever it may be. Some people have a good constitution. Why? Well, because they have a good constitution. Why? Because of how they've been brought up, the nutrients that they have. Somebody who has lesser nutrient levels are going to succumb to that illness a lot quicker. So we're looking at the plant. I'm looking at the health of the plant, because it's the roots and the soil that determine the health of the plant. The same as I can look at you and I can say you look healthy, or I can look at somebody else and I'll say they're unhealthy. Typically, that health issue will come from the gut, digestion. The inputs that we use within Korean natural farming, one of the elements, oriental herbal nutrient, is used in such minute amounts. We're talking 1 to 1,000. Let me check when I'm right on that. Yeah, 1 to 1,000. That ratio is minute. It's almost homeopathic, but it's rather like you taking a vitamin. You won't succumb to that cold as quickly, because you have that tiny little bit of something which is doing something else, which is helping something else. It's,
what was that called?
Oriental herbal nutrient.
And you put that into your soil,
That's into the soil,
right.
Yeah. And I've actually, I've got some over with me. I'll get you to test it.
Awesome.
Yeah. I'm going to fly over.
Yeah. Hopefully this is quite long. So is this something that humans ingest as well?
Yes.
Yeah.
Everything that we feed the soil, everything that we feed the plants, we can eat ourselves. So the main recipes, we're talking about oriental herbal nutrient. Well, I've got a long list here.
And is this does this fall under the umbrella of the Korean farming, or is this kind of other bits that you've picked up in your journeys and your experiences and kind of added it into this holistic pot of goodness?
No, it's a core element of Korean natural farming. There are 9 core recipes: Oriental herbal nutrient, brown rice vinegar, fermented fruit juice, fermented plant juice, water-soluble calcium phosphate, fermented seawater, and I think that's the 9. That's the core 9. Now, if you have those, then you're following Korean natural farming. You're following the Master Cho's methodology, but alongside that, you can also introduce things such as humic or fulvic acid. You could introduce kombucha. You could introduce any form of other inputs, but like with most martial arts, you learn the skill from the master. It's only then will you then be able to adjust that to then become a master. So think your Bruce Lee. He came up with his Wing Chun, but not after. He didn't become a master straight away. His system came from mastering another system. So I would always encourage anyone who's looking at Korean natural farming is learn the basic recipes, apply those, become confident with those, and once you're confident with them, then you can start freestyling it, shall we say. That's when you can then introduce elements, and you naturally would do that anyway. So in this country, let me just show you. This is the Oriental herbal nutrient, and it's...
So you've got a little, so I'd say a 10 milliliter tincture or so there with a...
It's exactly that. It's a tincture.
It's like a rusty water kind of, like a cloudy, ambery
Yes.
kind of hue to it. So got a smell. It smells...
It's an alcoholic tincture.
Smells nice.
Yeah.
It smells like an upmarket shot. Yeah.
It-
So just a few drops under the tongue?
Yeah. It's just...
And what, am I going to be on cloud 9 or...
No. All this is we take 5 of the main herbal nutrients that are used in Chinese medicine. So you're talking garlic, cinnamon, ginger, angelica, and the other one I've knew it off the top of my head. Cinnamon. I've mentioned that, haven't I? Let's go through it again. Cinnamon, licorice, angelica, garlic, and ginger. Now, all of those are associated with digestion, aiding of digestion. I don't know if you noticed as you swallowing it, did you feel a bit of a warmth?
I did. It was nice.
Which is what digestion is. Your stomach heats up in order to be able to digest. So what we've done is we've taken those herbs and we've tinctured those herbs. But the difference between a normal tincture and the Korean natural farming is that first of all that we're going to do a fermentation. That fermentation is what breaks it down to its micronized level. So we're micronizing those elements. We're then suspending that in alcohol, and that as a tincture, take every day. Now the one you had there was actually a concoction that I did myself, which was ginger, mango, mugwort, and turmeric.
Wow. A lot of good stuff in there.
Yeah, and found it's great for cold sores. But this is the Oriental herbal.
So how's it good for cold sores? Do you say like preventative or like when you get one? Because I suffer from cold sores, and when you get one, it just basically runs its course.
Yeah.
So in what capacity do you use that for?
It's like anything. Well, you get something and you say it runs its course. What happens is you have a level of activity which overtakes the normal, and it's not until those guys are forced back into normal, if you like, so back to balance, that your cold sore will go away. Well, how do you reduce that likelihood of that occurrence happening? The same as you would take a vitamin. Drop every day, you build up no immunity to it, and it's like taking a vitamin. So you won't have that. I don't admit to saying it's a cure for cold sores. A friend's wife said, actually, this is the only thing that worked for it, and the reason being is simply because it got her immunity to a certain level of balance. So that cold sore, which is basically a virus, isn't it? That virus, or effectively a pathogen, got out of control. Well, how do you suppress that? Well, don't allow it to ring up its mates and say, yeah, this is easy pickings. Come here, we'll have a party. We'll only last for a couple of weeks, but we'll kick it. Then things will go back to normal. So it's the Oriental Herbal Nutrient is really just as a tincture, and it's a way in which, in Korean natural farming, think of it like a medicine. Same as humans. We need food, we need medicine. Without that, we're not going to survive. Now, that medicine may be in its most basic form, or it may be an emergency form. For that, if we have a problem, if we have an imbalance, I would use the lactic acid bacteria to bring that back into balance, if you like. But the Oriental Herbal Nutrient is seen as a medicine within the farming system. Alongside that, you have the fermented fruit juice and fermented plant juice, which again are just micronized. You're effectively taking the life juice out of the plant, all of the growth hormones, all of the necessary mechanics, and I'm no scientist, but all of the things, like a blood transfusion, if you like. You're taking those essential elements and you're feeding those in a water-soluble, plant-available form, and also a microbe-available form. So that's the idea behind the herbal nutrient as well, is that you're micronizing, you're extracting the goodness out of those herbs, you're micronizing it, and then you're stabilizing it in alcohol. It will act as a medicine, and as we feed our plants, anything that we feed the plants, we can eat ourselves. So everything within the natural farming system is actually edible, unless you're a vegan. Then you may have issues. But again, you can grow veganic as well.
Could you? Nice.
Yeah, no, there's nothing to say that. But I only need to take a walk into our woods and see a dead animal to understand that it's part of the system as well. So I will see the bones of a pigeon or a fox or whatever, and it will slowly degrade there. And there is animal inputs, if you like. But there's nothing to say that you can't grow veganic. Sorry to shatter anyone's illusions, but we are covered in microbes, we're covered in living organisms, and we're eating them all the time. So it's
it's a tricky one. Where do you draw the line on that? Because pretty much any sort of food at any kind of sustainable level, there's going to be death of some sort of animal, insect, microbe involved. So
exactly. I'm not being derogatory. I'm just saying, if you have a microscope, you understand that life doesn't just have a certain size to it. So obviously, because that's what causes all the problems with human health. But
it makes perfect sense to me. A few years ago, I had a really poor tummy for weeks. Very, very painful, very unsettling. The only thing that fixed that was I bought those probiotic drinks, and I started drinking one of those in the morning. About a week later, it cleared up, and which was amazing. It makes sense. And it also speaks to this wider awareness, I feel, that we're starting to grip in the West. Though we're not quite good at it, but it's the preventative measures and feed the stuff that looks after the rest of you, right? Look after that and let it do the work.
I don't know if this is the right term, but a microbiome, what you've got in your gut will determine your health. So if you are feeding your gut the right things, then your gut will return. The idea of taking a probiotic, that's exactly what we do with Korean natural farming, and in particular with lactic acid bacteria, is that we are taking a microbe which will go in and will present balance or try to address the balance. But when we make it make it ourselves, rather than from a probiotic from a shop, they have to get a specific strain. They found that specific strain and they're able to bottle that specific strain. With lactic acid bacteria, we are taking a whole range of different, we don't even know. So again, the question, what's in there, we don't know. But what we know is that when we capture that lactic acid bacteria, we capture it using the right source. And when we introduce that into soil, it repairs soil, it brings balance. When you use it for human health, it does the same thing. I suffered probably about 6 years ago with really bad acid reflux. Could not eat a slice of bread without feeling that my chest was on fire. Made lactic acid bacteria, probably overdosed on it.
How do you make it?
It's basically lactic acid, which we gather from the air. But to finish the point, the lactic acid bacteria resolved the issue in my gut. I don't know, I won't want to use the cure, but I don't have that problem anymore. And now the majority of my diet is based on bread. So I don't have that issue. It's addressed it straight away because there clearly was an imbalance in my gut. So lactic acid bacteria, it is something that can be done very quickly, very easily. And if anybody wants to know more, then we'll provide details, and it's certainly up on the Instagram, the menu for this. Basically, what we're doing is we're taking white rice. Now, normally with rice, you would wash your rice and you get some milky water. Normally, you throw that away. Well, we keep that water, we put it into a bowl or into a jar, and we leave that to gather. And what we're doing is we're gathering lactic acid bacteria, which is everywhere, literally everywhere. It proliferates and it's captured in the rice wash water. After a couple of days, you'll see a skin or a film appear, rather than if you left your pan with that half washed rice in there. You'll see like a milky water, and then you'll see a skin appear. You'll see the starch settle down. So what we've done is we've created a swimming pool of starch where lactic acid bacteria come along and they'll go, yes, we'll have some of that. That's a great food source. So we're gathering that lactic acid bacteria in the rice wash water. After a couple of days, we're extracting that water and we're taking 1 part water and we're adding it to 10 parts of milk. So cow's milk, red top, green top, blue top, any not a nut milk. It has to be a milk, a goat's or a cow's milk. So we add that lactic acid bacteria to the milk. We'll cover that with a breathable lid and we'll leave it somewhere dark and warm, rather like our stomachs. What will happen is the lactic acid bacteria, or the lactobacilli, will convert the lactose in the milk, and what you'll get is curds and whey. So you get a separation. You've just created yogurt. That's all that process is. But we're using a broad spectrum rather than what a dairy would use, which is a very specific strain. They're doing exactly the same thing. So we separate the curds and the whey. So the lactic acid bacteria has consumed and converted the lactose in the milk. It's presented us with 2 distinct layers. A top layer, which is a spongy, solid lump. That's the curds. Take that away, squeeze it, add salt to it. You've got yourself cheese, or it's a yogurt straight away. It's a live yogurt. Below that, you've got the whey. That is a yellowy liquid. We take that yellowy liquid, so we separate it out, make sure it's strained. That yellow liquid we add to equal parts of brown sugar. That will then stabilise. So you've got a live culture. That LAB, effectively, or the rice wash water, which is now inoculated with lactic acid bacteria. They've had a party. They've done everything they need, and anything that doesn't like lactose that might have been in that rice wash water dies off. That's the skin. That's the bodies of microbes. So we're specifically culturing lactic acid bacteria, but we're creating or culturing a broad spectrum. We then stabilise that lactic acid bacteria with sugar, with brown sugar. And the reason why is because it will bind with the water molecules, which the microbes are made of, and it will put them into a suspended animation. Once that is being suspended and stabilised, then you would ideally keep it refrigerated. If it's refrigerated, you can close the lid, but it is a live culture. So I have had bottles of this explode because it's like kombucha, if you seal kombucha. So we have a lactic acid bacteria, and again, the amount you use is 1 to 1,000. So in every litre of water, I'd add 1 mil of lactic acid bacteria. And that
Not
would
a
be
lot.
enough. Nothing. It's hardly anything. It's almost homeopathic. It's nothing. 1 to 1,000. It's absolutely nothing.
Drop in the ocean, yeah.
Exactly. But in a micronized form, it's super plant available, super micro available. It is the super soldiers, if you like. It is the guys who will come in there, they will repair everything, and not only applies to soil, but it applies to human gut as well.
So do you only use that in a environment, like you said, where something negative may have been introduced? Do you bring that in as the hero, or do you put that in always?
Yeah, it's pretty much an emergency measure, if you like. But within Korean natural farming, you have distinct stages of plant growth, and the first stage is the soil preparation or seed soak. I would use lactic acid bacteria at that stage, and also in the first stage, which is the leaf growth. But lactic acid bacteria is expensive, and by that I mean it will want feeding. It will be dominant. So you can't use it too much because it's expensive to feed. It's like, and again I'm going to use a terminology, somebody else's terminology here, but it's like having a policeman on every street corner. You don't want that. You don't want that. Why? Because it's expensive. Yes, it does mean that nobody's going to kick off, but it's expensive. So you need to, again, have a bit of balance in when you use it. So we use it in the seed soak and the soil preparation stage, use it in the leaf growth stage, but beyond that, we'd only use it if there was an emergency.
Okay. So you mentioned different stages, and a lot of plants have a vegetative stage and then a flower or a blooming stage, and we touched upon the fact that most nutrients that you'd buy if you're growing some tomatoes, you would have very specific different ratios of chemicals in there that would lend itself to the leafing stage and then to the blooming stage. So does this carry through into this technique, or are you kind of using the same water throughout the whole grow?
No. It is very. It is exactly that. There are distinct stages whereby, and this again comes from recognising the plant. If we were to talk about a hemp plant, shall we say, as an example, and by hemp I mean all different strains of hemp, up to that which is grown in fields in the UK to that which is grown in basements in the UK. The same applies. You can look at a plant and you can look at that hemp plant and you know the stage. You know when it's in pre-flower. You know when it's flowering. You know when it's done. Now, a plant such as a tomato plant, which would be putting out fruits at different stages, fruits and flowers at different stages, it's again recognising the stage at which it needs it. You may find that if you have a, I've forgotten what the term is, determinate plant, if you have a determinate tomato, then you're going to be putting out at the right time. You're going to recognise it's now going to fruit, so therefore I now need to apply this input. If it's an indeterminate, then you're going to be switching between the two. And again, looking at a plant, you're able to recognise, is it going through, is it looking to grow leaf? Is it looking to grow roots? Is it looking to grow structure? So we have, I've got here. So we have basically the stages which are seed soak. You then have a leaf growth stage, a root and flower or structure stage. So it's like putting skin and bones onto a skeleton. You don't want a plant to have a really thin stem and massive leaves. Something's clearly out of balance. So giving it too much of one or too much of the other, you're going to see that change. So you can make a plant overfed. You hear people say that a plant, it's too green, or there's not enough leaf, or there's not enough stem. There needs to be a fine balance. You then have the seed or the fruit and reproductive stage. So this is where you're recognising, when is that plant becoming pregnant, shall we say. It will, like a human, will show signs of that switchover stage, that crossover stage as it's known in Korean natural. And it's the same for humans. A woman who is new to pregnancy will be craving certain things, more likely sour foods. So we're able to recognise that crossover stage and apply the right nutrients. So if it's in pregnancy, you would be applying folic acid beforehand and vitamin whatever once they're X weeks in. So that I always go back to look at a plant as you would look at a human, address that with the right solution. But if all else fails, we always have, across those entire stages, we always have oriental herbal nutrient, always brown rice vinegar, always fermented fruit juice or fermented plant juice.
Kind of a foundation there.
It's the maintenance solution. If all else fails, put those inputs out there.
So that's what I was going to ask you is, back when we started this conversation, you mentioned out of the laziness aspect, you want to be able to, leave something and come back. I'm the exact same. I mean, my garden, I start off with the best intentions. Come, like getting into winter time, it's just a heaping mess because I haven't maintained it, properly.
Yeah.
So, but this to me looks like quite involved. So, is this simpler or less touch than currently established systems, or is it just different?
If the way that I would always look at it is, this is why I'm involved in the hemp industry. Not only for the fact that I'm looking to we sell a hemp soap and I'm looking for the best hemp oil for that, but also the hemp industry, rather like the cannabis industry, is more open. People in the cannabis industry and in the hemp industry want to know, they want to learn, they want to produce the best product. There's not many plants that are used for medicine that have so much care taken. I'm trying to encourage the cannabis community to do it, not only because it is the best way to get the best out of a plant, but also it's the cheapest way to do it. And the cannabis industry is a new industry and will be even newer. And if we have a way in which, same with organic food, price and availability, if you can compete on price and availability, everyone will want organic. Nobody's going to want the crappy chemical stuff. You see it with plastic now. If there is an option, I will not have plastic. It's the same with cannabis. We need to grow organically. And the best way that I've found is using nature's methodology. We just do as nature does. We mimic effectively, and the way in which we can do that is by creating good soil life. So is it easier? Well, there's nothing more stressful than realizing you've missed when you meant to put liquid A, and oh no, I've missed it by a week and now I'm off schedule. A plant doesn't grow to a schedule. The schedules, yes, well, we know you can veg a plant for as long as you want, but somebody selling you a nutrient will say only veg it for 8 weeks. Why? Because I only want you to veg it for 8 weeks, so you keep coming back and buying my product. Whereas I'd look at it and say, well, if you can reduce that cost, if you can reduce that reliance on somebody else telling you how to farm your plant, then that level of confidence, that level of ownership is going to be far greater, far more rewarding. There's nothing worse than looking at modern agriculture and saying, right, what do you need to do? And them saying, I'll wait for the guy to turn up to sell me stuff to tell me what to do. Let's bring farming back to farmers. I enjoy looking out and recognising when a plant is ready to go. Is it effort? Not really, because I can put a sprayer on my back and I can water. Everything that I can do is based on water. I can spray it out on a larger scale. We've got industrial size sprayers. So the mechanics are very simple. The inputs are very healthy. The product is going to be the healthiest product. You are what you eat eats. So whatever you are eating, has consumed something and is going to take that on board. It's going to assimilate it into its cells. That's the truth for cannabis, it's the truth for tomatoes, it's the truth for potatoes. So are we going to continue with a system whereby we're polluting our soil, polluting our plants? To what end? To pollute ourselves? No. We're going to go back and say, well, let's grow the plant to its fullest capabilities. Let's give it an environment whereby we don't need to be spraying shit on it every other week because it's so weak it can't handle a couple of green fly. That's the sort of thing that we need to move away from. And if it requires a little bit of extra effort, I've learned that that effort is only in the initial learning. Beyond that, it's like this tincture. To take it every day, it's habit.
Maintenance. Yeah.
Exactly.
So cheap and more accessible. What is the final yields like in comparison? Would you expect a higher yield or just similar yield?
If yield is your if yield is your measure, then increase in yield. Yeah, you only need to look at a forest and say, in nature's wisdom lies the path to abundance. You only need to look. If given the opportunity to flourish to its fullest extent, a forest will become arboreal. A forest will become self-sustaining. We always go back to the who feeds the forest. As for quality, absolutely. I have eaten tomatoes that taste like tomato, strawberries that taste like strawberries, and gained terpenes, mycins, you name it. You can taste the individual elements in these plants. Why? Because the plant has become the best it can become. Why? Because it's being fed the best it can. Why? Because these indigenous microorganisms, they know how to do it. They've been doing it for a millennium, and they replicate every 30 minutes. Lo and behold, what have you got there? You've got yourself super soldiers who know exactly what to do, and they're not going to be poisoning the plant. Short answer, yield increased, quality increased. How much? Exponentially.
Dude, that was awesome. We're out of time, but that was certainly a learning roller coaster and some really worthwhile and excellent techniques. So thank you for sharing them with me and all of the listeners.
No, thank you very much. And can I just say, big shout out to my man Tasty. We love you.
I'm sure he'll know who that is.
He will. He will.
Tasty!